How's it going, everyone? It's been a while, a whole year, but we're back with the show that Fern really doesn't like us to do. Mostly
I
Peaceful
don't think he really
Podcast.
feels that strong about it. Like, I know he just doesn't want to get dragged into any drama over it, but I, d- I, I think as long as he doesn't have to be involved, he's perfectly content to let us do this side project.
Yeah, so we're back. Uh, it has been a rough couple years since we did one of these last time. We did one about this time last year. Oh, we did several about this time last year, actually. We did seven, I think, and they're still up on the YouTube channel. I don't think any of them have been deleted. I think this is episode 8. Uh, unless I can't count. That's a possibility. So yeah, we're back, and we're going to go over a little bit of the last 2 years, and give you guys your U.S. midterm special by covering the important stuff going on with midterms, the big stuff that people are paying attention to, major topics that are being discussed around it, and the major issues that people will likely be voting on. We'll also be recovering, I should say, a little bit of the shenaniganery that happened in 2020, just so it's fresh in your brain because it's going to be relevant to this discussion.
Yeah,
Uh,
everything has been of a piece up until this point. I don't know about you, but my sense of the passing of time has gotten really distorted, in no small part due to government overreach trying to handle an alleged pandemic. Um, but it seems like the the last few years could all be smushed into this current one. Um,
yeah,
since time has sort of simultaneously been sort of dilated and contracted as fits whatever is currently going on. But yeah, I'm in two minds as to whether we positioned this to be before the midterms, but I'm in two minds as to whether the midterms are going to represent a terminal or even critical point of it, or whether they're going to be a total damp squib that doesn't change trajectories at all, or even indicate what's going to happen in the future. Then again, it could be a colossal mess. So
well,
I guess it depends on a lot of factors, but most of them are not in our hands. I don't think that the actual voting has anything to do with it.
yeah, it's we will see. And so I guess we should reintroduce ourselves. It has been 2 years. I'm Aristile.
And I'm Vaulisel. We are two of the three hosts of the No Excuses podcast, which focuses on gaming in theory. Um, and we do this side project under the title of Mostly Peaceful because Fern doesn't want to be involved. He doesn't find the spectator sport of politics quite as entertaining as we do.
Yeah, he doesn't have nearly as much investment in the topic, and gets very uncomfortable whenever we bring it up. And I will often do it just to mess with him because it's
Well,
funny.
basically because the two of us are more edgelord than he's comfortable with.
Yeah, and that's worth noting. For those of you that don't remember, we are a partisan podcast.
Yeah, we're not even trying to be balanced, really. I
No,
mean, that I'm not sure what the actual value in being balanced is. It's it's sort of a strange idea that you should be able to simultaneously adopt one framing of the world and another framing of the world in a discussion.
I
I'm not really sure how people are supposed to be able to do that. And I mean, even my frame of reference and Aristile's frame of reference are not the same because I'm a monarchist from a monarchist country with a monarchist background, raised to respect the monarchy and to see myself as a son of the British Empire. Aristile is not.
no, I am a proud son of the Patriots. We are rebels, and we threw our king out.
But
Well, we didn't throw him
yeah,
out. We threw his tea out, and we told him to go take a hike.
he was a weak king, and he kind of deserved it for being weak. But the loyalists were still right. Anyway, the point is, we're not going to be saying any of this, but both sides,
Yeah,
because I don't give a toss about that line of
and
argument.
neither of us
I'm
believe it.
only I'm only interested in the appropriate level of righteousness for our side. I do not care what the other side is doing at all.
Yeah, we don't believe in the both sides argument to begin with.
And
Uh,
people who believe evil and corrupt philosophies should be crushed underfoot. That's what they're for.
yeah, and that is not to say we won't take pot shots at things that are nominally on our side. We are very much of the, I guess you would call it,
Well, nominal is definitely the word. There's a
yeah,
lot of things that are nominally on our side that are clearly not working to our interests.
yeah, and
And when we say our, we sort of mean loosely on the right.
yeah, the loosed country first politics. Since Vol is not technically American, America first is the current buzzword for it, but that's
Yeah, well, I mean, they say America first. People have different ideas about what that means, but in the case of America, they have a very strong faction of people in politics who appear to hate their own country, and that's sort of why America first has become the terminology for it, because their opposition clearly hate America. Um, I do not have very strong feelings about America. I feel like if you consider America as a unified actor on the world stage, I think they have, broadly speaking, done a very, very, very poor job at basically everything they've gotten involved in the last 70 years or so. They've just generally been a corrosive influence on the world stage. Coincidentally, their actions as the world police have managed to keep some negative actors in check, but generally speaking, they have clowned up every fine detail of every intervention that they've ever made. So,
yeah, or just kick.
when you regard America as a global actor, I think America is bad, but I think that Americans are entitled to have their government support their personal interest as a country. And my my interest in that point of view is that if the Americans start taking care of their own interests, maybe they'll butt out of everybody else's.
Yeah, I am an American. I live here. I want my place I live to be nice. And right now, everybody seems a whole lot more interested in someplace off in Sandland than right here, or some
Or Eastern
corrupt,
Europe.
yeah, or some corrupt hellhole that until 5 minutes ago was well known across all media outlets as the most corrupt place on earth. We'll get to that. So, couple more things before we really jump into the meat of this. This episode, I'm going to try to upload it on both Rumble and YouTube. YouTube is not a safe platform anymore. It's even less safe than 2020, if that's believable. Their eyes may not be as hard on it, but their rules are still here and continue to increase. So I'll
Yeah.
be putting a backup on Rumble for every show going forward because I don't actually know if I have the archives of the other ones, and they were probably cringy anyway. So
Yeah,
I'll
I'm sort of interested to see whether Elon will be able to make good on his plans to make Twitter into a video platform as well.
yeah, that'll give us a that would give us a nice source. Hopefully, we'll have to see. A lot of stuff still up in the air about that. But the other thing, a lot of stuff we're going to say on the show is going to be very negative. There is a whole lot of dark clouds hanging over a lot of what we're going to say. I want you to take all this that we're about to say as just statements of fact and not something to emotionally demoralize you with.
Yeah,
Because
this is not an exercise in black pilling. There are a lot of things around that are happening that are black pills. There are a lot of negative possible futures that are just on our doorstep, but that doesn't preclude you from acting constructively.
yeah, you still have a responsibility to get out there and fight like it's like the possibility of winning is still, right there. And
Yeah, but
if you just work at it, you can get it.
I don't believe in democracy. Like I said, I'm a monarchist. I think democracy always fails and is incapable of delivering a good future for the people of a country. However, I still always vote. Not because I believe that voting works. In fact, I don't believe that voting has any impact whatsoever on policy or even on what the government will be. Writ large, most people who are voting don't think about policy at all. They just vote the way the telly tells them to. And as long as that is the case, democracy is a worthless enterprise. But that still doesn't mean that I don't vote, because you can still send certain signals with voting. You can still gain certain data with voting about the motion of thought in the country, the way people are behaving, the way people are acting. It's a useful data set in certain respects. And I feel like if you are condemned to live in a democratic country, you should still fulfill your responsibility of voting, even though it doesn't mean anything.
On a practical level, if you do live in a district where you happen to get lucky, you don't know if you're in one of those districts. I don't care how red or blue your district is. You have no idea what your district will turn out with these days. if you go out there and you vote, at the in at least you have a chance to forestall a worse future if you manage to flip it.
Yeah, I think actually in light of this, and this is a very edgy opinion, but I think that voter fraud is a good thing because what it means is that they're scared enough that they can't manipulate the minds of people directly, that they have to cheat in a very tangible fashion.
Hypothetical
In
voter
a
fraud.
country
Yes.
like mine, where the media basically has control over the way people think, no fraud is necessary. You do not need fraud to elect a globalist government in New Zealand because your only options are globalist, and everybody thinks globalism is a good thing.
Yeah.
But if voter fraud is taking place, it means that they're scared that a legitimate outcome would happen if they didn't do it.
Yeah. And more to the point, they had a demonstration of what happens when they don't intervene when they thought they had it in the bag in 2016 because they thought they had that one in the bag. That they truly believed it, but and they did not pull out all the stops. We'll say so. That's how we got Trump. The will of the people was actually enacted, and we saw how
I
the
think that was a case of them basically energetically huffing their own farts so much that they thought that everybody saw the Trump the way that they
yeah
did.
yeah they put themselves inside their own echo chamber so hard that they thought they had this, and they thought everybody thought like they did, and got a rude awakening on that Tuesday.
That's because up until that point, there was no way for them to distinguish between a scenario like New Zealand, where the outcome of the vote is simply determined by the media, and the scenario where they actually need to cheat in order to ensure that that outcome will take place. There's no way for them to tell the difference because they had been hitherto putting up candidates like Mitt Romney and George W. Like, how can you even tell the difference in that case?
Yeah,
You've given people the classic what is it, giant douche versus turd sandwich vote,
yeah, and
and so you can't tell whether or not people are actually in rebellion. But presented with the Trump option, people showed that actually they had a particular voting will, and that's one of those fringe cases where something that's not quite going to plan happens. One of those few situations in which the corpse of the body politic will twitch when given an electric shock.
and
Not enough to make me believe in democracy, but enough to demonstrate that the elite in the United States didn't have as much control in 2016 as they believed they did.
I I I am still formulating my full opinion on it because I don't fully disbelieve in democracy as a base of an idea to work off of. But I think the United States has reached a point where it's shown us the failings in the way we've enacted it as a republic, and where we've failed to stop power from expanding exponentially. You can't ever really do that with any government. You can't lock it down permanently. I mean, people are people. We live in a fallen world, but we can make it harder for it to happen with every time we iterate on it, and
I
that's where I'm at right now.
I do feel I sympathize with um actually with Tucker Carlson on this. Like, when I try and see things from an American point of view, I can sort of sympathize with Tucker Carlson's take that, well, realistically, the problem is that the elite who are supposed to take care of the interests of the plebs in the United States are just a garbage elite. Because your country does operate on an aristocracy. That's where you're currently at. You're not in the healthy republic phase. You're in the aristocracy phase, the oligarchy phase. If you want to look at it in Plato's terms, where you are weighing up a rule by elite as either being a responsible aristocracy or an irresponsible oligarchy, you are definitely in the oligarchical stage. And if you are hell bent on the idea of preserving the current order, then you really do need to lay your complaint at the feet of your elite, which means that you've got this sort of responsibility to dethrone the current elite and raise a new elite. So your only solutions are going to be generationally long ones.
Yeah, but
So
yeah,
while it's important to take the temperature of things that are going on, I think the reason that it is important to avoid blackpilling is that you simply need to realize that there is no quick solution to these things. All of these are generational problems.
yeah, and the most impact you as an individual realistically have is with those you can personally interact with and those that you know, those that you love and live with and hang out with. Those are the people that you will help influence and change the mind of over time, not through some dramatic argument where you change their mind
Yeah, I
and
don't think that you can change people's minds in a way that matters. I think
just
that the approach has to be one of changing the way people live so
yeah
that their values are good. A few
and
generations of good values, and then people won't care what the elite have to say anymore.
yeah. So just live your life the best you can and try to forestall the bad ends that are coming at if at the very least. Maybe we get lucky. Maybe we do. I can't see the future.
I don't know what that looks like. Like I don't know how you get from here to there, but these things can happen sometimes
I
where
didn't see,
things just suddenly change for the better. But
yeah, nobody saw Trump coming and we got 3.5 years of great prosperity
yeah, unfortunately, it led to possibly the worst government in American history.
or world history. I think we're approaching at that point.
I don't think it's quite that bad. I don't think
But
it's
you
quite that
give it
bad.
time. It's still on tracks there. We're not there
Some of
yet.
some of those late Roman kings were pretty extreme.
Don't worry. Joe will find a way to get there. Never underestimate Joe Biden's ability to F shit up.
Anyway, let's get back on track. That's sort of like a the 10,000 foot view of what we're thinking right now. But let's get into a bit more of the finer details.
Right. So, one thing before we really jump into it, why it took us so long to do this show. Our notes, as they're laid out when we're breaking into these topics, are lighter than they usually are this time, but they still take forever to put together. So, we will do these when we can. And also, stuff is just lies. Parsing what's true and what's not is very, very difficult these days, especially since my main source for doing so is currently on again, off again, depending on how Noel's got the server hamsters running that day. So we will continue to keep MPP alive for now. We do not know when the next episode is going to be, so Serathis, it's not worth asking. It'll come when it comes.
Yeah, ultimately there's a problem of we don't have access to reliable information, and that the information fire hose flows faster than we can note down things we are important. And by the time we finish putting together a set of notes, usually we have to throw them out because the situation has changed so much that a discussion about the previous situation is not valuable.
You know,
And I mean,
we we
I
had to
lie
chuck
pretty.
two whole shows.
Yeah, I lie pretty significantly further to the right than Aristile does, and in those spheres on the right, they've pretty much given up on examining the current political situation entirely, and have just sort of folded in on themselves to pure localism, because basically they consider it's a lost battle at this point, and that they're trying to wage a culture war from a different angle, starting at the local level and with personal improvement and building outwards. I think that that's a very important, and that's what will ultimately result in a good society in the long term. But I think that there is also useful information to be gained by an examination of very current topics and how the world is operating, um, because you can, if nothing else, learn what not to do and what doesn't work.
Yep. All right. So let's open this up with a brief refresher of 2020 without saying the word for thieving. So in 2020, election night happened, and then election night was supposed to end, and it didn't. It kept going, and and votes kept coming in suspiciously all for one side, and 5 major states just flipped all at the same time.
The infamous logo of
The Biden
the
spike.
overlapping lines. Yeah,
Yeah.
like that's become a cultural institution. Some of my favorite memes of Joe Biden have been him wearing that as an armband, a la the Nazi Party.
Yep. So for those that don't remember, there was a bunch of alleged incidents involving the Dominion voting machines in multiple states, poll watchers that were removed in multiple states, Republican watchers and the general public blocked from viewing the ballots being counted illegally in multiple states. No legal repercussions for any of this in every state. Every state offered a no standing case where a major case was presented and never ever got to the merits of the case. So anybody that tells you that it was settled in court, it was not settled in court. It never ever
Yeah,
got to the merits.
I keep hearing it, like to this day, I keep hearing it, and it's deeply frustrating that people keep saying, "Well, the cases got thrown out of court. Oh, but the cases went to court and they lost." No, 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 no battle took place. The battle was forbidden to take place. That was the issue because nobody was able to convince enough of the courts to a sufficient level that any given party had standing. And by that, I mean nobody was willing to get the court so frightened of the outcome that of letting sleeping dogs lie that they were willing to actually take the bull by the horn. So it was just and the whole thing was just judicial cowardice as far as I can tell.
Yeah,
Pure judicial cowardice. I'm sure that there were some frivolous cases brought by crazy people, but there always are. Like those happen every day. But there were definitely cases that were not frivolous, and you can't tell me that somebody must have standing in order to bring these cases about unconstitutional changes to
yeah.
election procedure. Somebody must have standing. I don't know who it is. I don't know enough about how the law applies to different parts of the body politic in the United States to determine who it is that must have standing, but somebody must.
Because it
It
deals with
doesn't seem.
election procedure and vote counting, it would almost certainly fall under the states' rights and the state laws. And while those do differ between states, every citizen in most states would have standing in a sane world, an sane reading of the laws. The problem is, this was a bull that a court would have to take by the horns, and it was a big, scary one, and all of them were too scared of it. Like this thing
Yeah.
was going to turn into a monster the second any court said, "Okay, let's take a look at it," and they were just all too afraid to do it, even though it was the morally right thing to do.
Yeah, this is a lot of why people have lost so much faith in the United States system is because it is very clear that if you have a situation of such a thoroughgoing case of judicial cowardice, it means one of your three legs of your three-legged stool has fallen off.
Yeah, and this was a big wake up call to me that the system is busted. The judicial branch doesn't function, and without it to check the executive and without it to check the legislature, we don't have a way to stop them from running out of control, which is exactly what's happening. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, where this just in broad daylight, nobody can deny it. That leg of the government doesn't function as intended.
Yeah, and I guess I can't prove that. I can't prove that it was judicial cowardice. I can't prove that it wasn't just a situation where
Well,
the
we
the
can't
the
prove
act of
most of
take.
what we're going to say, but it's dang easy to infer, and it's the simplest explanation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and in a sense, proving things in its own way is often worthless these days because when you try and prove something, usually you are going to call upon evidence, but uh,
We can't trust the
so much of
evidence.
unless I were to hold it in my hand, unless I were to speak with the person responsible and have them confess to me, how can I trust anything reported these days? Like, it's very, very difficult to trust anything reported because everybody seems to be like this bizarre consequentialism has swept over everybody to the point where everybody is willing to say the ends justify the means. So I can lie about anything so long as it accomplishes my goals. In a world like that, how can anybody believe anything that's being reported?
Yeah. For a long time now, I've had a background catchphrase of people will lie just to tell a better story on Facebook. This is the argument I've broken out word for word to boomer cons that'll watch the television and believe it.
Yeah, well, if that's the thing though, that should work in a sane world. That should work because boomers are on Facebook. I gather that boomers are mainly the demographic that uses Facebook, but they are just willing to accept a lot of what they see, even though they see the Facebook stories that they know are tall tales every day. Are we at the point where they actually believe everything they read on Facebook too? Are they that credulous? I don't know, but it does really seem to me like there's some very, very obvious problems here with people's ability to connect one thing to another, for people's ability to see second order effects. Lots of these things seem to be become suddenly defective, and I'm
Yeah,
not really sure why.
yeah. I think well, it go off into the weeds to really talk about that right now. But I want to finish up the recap real quick. Uh, the other thing that happened was unconstitutional changes to the election process were made in 2020 that are not there this time in 2022.
Yet.
Yet most of them have been challenged in court and taken away successfully. Some states
Which
haven't been as successful, but Arizona, Georgia, and a few others have been very successful at it.
I'm hesitant to call it a success because the fact that they did it to begin with suggests to me a sort of brinksmanship, right? Because what they know is that they got away with it last time with no repercussions.
Yeah,
Restoring things back to the way they were is not a repercussion. That just shows that they could get away with it scot free, which makes me think rather than thinking that, oh well, things have been restored and we don't have to worry about this time. Well, next time maybe they'll just push it a bit further. Maybe they think that, oh well, we can just retroactively change it now. We can do what we want because
yeah.
we've observed now that the law won't touch us.
And I'm not saying that's not going to happen. I'm not even saying that's not the most likely thing to happen. I think it is. But what I am saying is because we did manage to get things slid back and mail-in voting pulled out and more security placed on boxes in Georgia, like you're allowed to just watch boxes with a gun in Georgia. You can sit there at a box with a gun and watch it.
There'll be a law passed against that very, very shortly, I expect.
Yeah, but if
Then it
states,
will get stuck for 36 months in the Supreme Court waiting to be heard because it will be done on the grounds of Second Amendment.
yeah,
You know how it is. How
but
often does the Supreme Court hear Second Amendment cases?
yeah, I know. But for this year, well, it would go to the Georgia Supreme Court and they'd probably stop there. But for now, this election, you got a shot. They may not have as many of the apparatuses in place that they did last time. They may not be able to pull off the uh, event they did in 2020. I'm trying so hard not to say the S word.
I have a bit more of a cynical take on it. Like, I see this not as an opportunity to overcome what the opponents have put in place, so much as an opportunity to force their misbehavior out in the open, to force them to be more and more egregious with their behavior, to the point where people who up until now have been willing to stick their head in the sand will be less and less willing to do so.
Yeah, I think that's a good reason to keep fighting it, even if and keep fighting these battles in the courts and keep pushing for these changes, even if they're just going to dial them back and try to put in even more creative cheating measures as as time goes on. I uh, I think you will push them to a point where they'll have to do more and more ridiculous things until eventually there has to be a breaking point. People can't ignore this forever. Like at some point, even the boomer cons have to recognize what's going on.
Well, I mean, this is the whole bread and circuses thing, though, right? People are willing to be bought off with bread and circuses, and that's sort of the problem.
Yeah, it's just and the only way I can think to get them out of that rut is two ways. One of them's not very fun. Let things get as bad as possible so that they're forced to get out of that rut because they realize just how bad everything's gone and start taking a look at what's how they got there. Number two, hopefully those that are making the decisions to commit the illegal acts in the voting process uh do something so ridiculous or go so overboard that they you can't not prosecute them. Something like Fulton County voting with twice the number of people inside the entire district. Because you know they'd get that stupid, and you know they would get that desperate, and
Yeah,
they would
well,
try
I
it.
mean, that's my argument for just pushing them, pushing them, push them, push them, push them, push them. The democratic process, in my view, is not worth it to try and win. You can sometimes win by accident, but it's not something that I feel any amount of effort really will build towards. But you can force the system to become evident in its failings. You can stick a knife in the gap between the stones and lever it open so that people can see these aren't actually fitting together properly. The system has too many holes in it. There are too many bad actors, and they have the system is framed as operating within the boundaries that they have set up. The whole system is designed to operate for specific benefits of specific people, and not for the polis itself, not for the actual body politic.
Yeah. So yeah, this is your recap of what happened. All those things happened. You know, in Georgia there was a water pipe burst, and we all saw the video. There was a video that happened, and YouTube will ban you if you play it. They've gone out of their way to scrub it. So is Twitter, pre Elon Musk, Facebook, all the social media sites have scrubbed it. It's very hard to search it on any search engine, but you all know the video I'm talking about because you all saw it many times of them just pulling the suitcases out and running the same ballots over and over and over again. We know it happened. We caught them on video. We caught them on video in my county moving files between the voting machines and a computer during election day.
I mean, there've been I've seen people who were involved in poll watching talking about what they were thinking they could get away with, quite brazenly, because in that previous Twitter environment, they knew that there would be no repercussions because they're politically protected.
Yeah.
Like this was not something that was really rigorously concealed. They were willing to count on the media and the courts to have their back.
Yep.
But I
And
mean, if you look at the way the numbers sit now, something like nearly half of all like Democrat voters believe that there's something illegitimate about the 2020 election, and nearly all of Republican voters believe that. That means that effectively most of the country believes that the current regime is in some way has compromised legitimacy. They may not all be able to articulate exactly how much and in what way, but most of the United States does not believe the Biden administration is fully legitimate.
yeah, you ask any red-blooded American, and if I don't care how they vote, if they're part of the working class, they're going to tell you that Joe Biden is basically not the president, even though he's got the sticker. And
The thing is that I think that category is even larger. Like, I think the category of people who are willing to tell you Joe Biden is not the president is larger than the people who think that the election was in
oh
some
yeah,
way compromised legitimacy. Because I think most people can see it now that the White House is a different entity from the executive.
yeah. And I am very rigorous about trying to correct myself whenever I'm talking about the office of president currently. I will say resident if possible because that's what he is.
Well, I mean, I don't talk about him being elected. I talk about him being inaugurated. So,
Yeah,
because you did inaugurate him, whether you like it or not,
oh,
he is your president in terms of he was inaugurated as such.
so let's talk a little bit about this Muppet and and give people an idea for that maybe haven't been following just what Joe is as close as we do because Joe is unintentionally the funniest person on the planet.
Yeah, like I mean, the easiest way to get a quick précis of what Joe Biden is all about is just to like type funny Joe Biden moments into YouTube, because even YouTube can't get rid of them all.
Yeah, Joe Biden is the most laughably incompetent old man in politics you've ever seen.
I think that competence shouldn't even enter into the equation. Like, I think the continence issue have to be dealt with first.
Well, yeah, you don't want to be stinking up the Vatican, which Joe did. Uh, so yeah, I mean, this guy has got caught with back when needing a
Oh, with his
teleprompter.
pants backwards.
Yeah, caught with his pants backwards. I could not find if that was a Photoshop or not, but it looks real legit to me. So, because I still almost don't believe it, even though the people
Yeah,
that got it from said that this is totally real. I still don't really believe it's that bad because you can't put your pants on backwards. How do you do that? Those aren't
well, I
basketball
think that
shorts
this
or
is
sweatpants. Those are well, they have a belt loop.
Well, I mean, realistically, this is a sort of situation that happens when, like, we may think of Joe Biden as sort of a sick joke, but probably internally his handlers do too. At this point, they probably resent the fact that they've got to take care of this old man like he matters.
Yeah. He is. I have no qualms making fun of this old man who is clearly he should be retired with his family or in a home or being taken care of somewhere because his brain ain't all there. He forgets where he is, wanders off all the time, gets derailed in the middle of his speeches, and he'll have can't think of the word for it, but he'll just take a word and try to say it and lose the syllables halfway through and invent a new word like or whatever it was. And he does this repeatedly.
He was trying to say true international pressure.
Yeah. And he does this all the time now. Like his brain to mouth wires are clearly on the fritz. They're just too
But
old. And
but
his
but,
brain
but
to brain wires
Aristile,
are what?
he had a stutter.
Yeah,
Remember? A stutter that disappeared from his political career for 80 years of his life.
yeah. That was a bald-faced lie because anybody can go look up the videos of Joe Biden giving fiery speeches. Go watch him grilling Clarence Thomas at the Supreme Court hearing. Then,
I don't know if he was the one who was grilling Clarence Thomas. I don't think it was the other way around, to be honest.
yeah, he was getting lobbed those volleys right back at him and
the,
taking
the,
them
the
right to the
reality
face.
is that there has never been a time where Joe Biden wasn't a room temperature IQ.
Yeah,
It's just that he was sort of like a high functioning room temperature IQ before.
yeah, he was a useful puppet and has always been a useful puppet for whoever currently has their hand up his butt.
Just ask Obama.
Yeah, just ask Obama. I quoted him earlier in the show. Never underestimate how bad Joe can f things up. So, Joe Biden, people still, not as much as they used to, people have finally started to get it into the collective consciousness that Joe's not there because the reflex for Americans is to blame the president. I don't know why that's the case for everything, but it is. Um, and you can attribute a whole lot of things that in executive overreach to the president, but that's about it. Him signing off and making the legislature able to pass absolutely crazy things is the problem in Joe's case. But and the but Joe's current puppeteers, while we don't know for sure who they are because obviously they're not going to confirm who they are, they want you to believe Joe Biden is the executive like every other president before him. This is not the case. He is a puppet,
Well,
completely and totally.
he still holds the pen and the stamp,
Yeah, he
but
does.
he doesn't read anything. In fact, hasn't he been hasn't he said on record that he doesn't have any idea what he's signing?
Yeah,
I'm
he
pretty sure I saw a clip of him saying something like that.
yeah he did. It was signing some piece of legislation, and he had no clue what he was signing for, but he just signed it. And then like the dude doesn't know what he's doing to begin with. He forgets his speeches halfway through, even with the teleprompter and cue cards and notes scribbled on his hand. We've seen him have all three before. Like the dude's a train wreck. But he is my theory, and I think it's the sanest one because it's the simplest one. Is he is just the puppet of whatever three-letter agency that day has a particular agenda they want pushed and has the ear of the executive at that particular moment. And that he does not have a consistent, easily conspiracy theorist type mastermind. It's just whoever happens to be able to get a hold of him because he's just part of the machine. He's just a, a guaranteed rubber stamp and who is not going to interfere or cause any damage to the three-letter agencies, so they just use him. And that they're the ones that are running the executive for the most part. That's what it certainly appears to be, based on the types of things that have been proposed from the office, like their misinformation board and stuff. I
Well,
don't know.
more importantly, it's the fact that the quote unquote White House disagrees with him so much of the time.
Yeah, if Joe Biden accidentally says something on 60 Minutes, like a certain pandemic is over, um, the White House will come out and say that's not the opinion of the executive branch. Every other administration, the president was the executive branch. You guys are toadies. This is inverted here. Joe Biden is the toad, made of stuffing with a hand up his butt. Tried to make a Muppet joke there, but lost it halfway through. And and yeah, that's not a whole lot to say about Joe, other than the reason I don't feel bad making fun of Joe is Joe Biden has been an evil man his whole life. He's been
He's
a
earned it over the course of his career. He may be a doddering old airhead now, but the things that he did when he was compos mentis, to the extent that he ever was, they more than justify him to be considered to be a reprobate.
yeah,
There's
and
no question about it. Like he didn't always have no marbles, and he, with full understanding of what he was doing, has committed treason against the United States on multiple occasions.
yeah, and I still get a lot of boomer comments who are like, I feel bad for Joe. The ones that do understand that Joe's just a puppet, they're like, oh, I feel bad for old Joe. He's just an old man, and they're just using. I don't. No. Did you forget what he did under Obama? Did you
I
forget
might
the
feel
way he
bad for
treated
him if he
Clarence
wasn't
Thomas?
Joe Biden.
Yeah, like
Like
did
he
you
is Joe
forget all
Biden
his
though, so
did you forget all of his international deals, especially the ones in Ukraine? Did you forget what he did to Clarence Thomas? Like this man does not deserve our sympathy just because he's at the tail end of his life. He has used his life for personal self gain at the expense of others.
yeah.
So
Ultimately, his political career was sort of as like a basically a sort of Democrat thug. Like he was very sort of low low goals in a sense. Like the only thing in his mind was sort of like personal enrichment and protecting his seat. Like he's not an ideologue the way say Barack Obama was. Like Joe Biden, the politician, never wanted anything except personal enrichment.
yeah, and so also remember that this guy campaigned from his basement and
Well,
somehow got
campaigned is a strong word.
yeah. And remember, if you don't vote for Joe Biden, you're not black.
He's the most popular president in American history.
Yeah,
I hope you don't forget that.
won more black votes in Chicago than Obama. Won more votes than any president in U.S. history, even though Trump did that the last time, and Biden somehow still managed to beat him in what is totally a legitimate and fair election. Don't let them gaslight you, you folks. Don't let it happen. As time goes by, I know what time does to your brain, and when it comes to memory, and I have been very diligent in reminding myself, don't get gaslighted. And I would encourage you to do that too, as the listeners, because they are trying to gaslight you already. They're trying to make you pretend that this really happened and it was legitimate. No, don't believe them. Put a sticker up that shows all the events that happened in November of 2020. I have one on my bulletin board at work for God and everybody to see that walks by my desk. That it's just a list of the quote unquote irregularities that takes up a whole half of the board. So yeah, that's Joe Biden, and I just wanted to get that out of the way so people know who we're talking about. So, you got anything else on Joe before we move on?
Oh, no, not really, because in a sense he's sort of irrelevant. He's basically just a marker that the American system is not functioning.
Yeah,
The fact that that man sits in the seat of the executive is a marker that something is horribly wrong and the republic does not function. Something has broken down in the system. It might be an open question whether or not you can repair it or whether you've got to scrap it and build something else, but the machine of the republic is not functioning
yeah,
because the one of the branches in Joe Biden is non-compos mentis,
and
and one of the branches in the judiciary is not able to muster up the testicular fortitude to actually perform its role as one of the checks and balances.
yeah. Can we just clone Clarence Thomas 9 times?
He wouldn't approve.
That's true. Can we time travel younger versions of him to sit alongside him? Yeah, I'm getting more and
Let's
more
just
ridiculous in my
let's just
hypotheticals,
move on. Let's
but
just move on.
yeah. So okay, next up, we unfortunately need to cover this. I really don't want to give this too much highlighting because it is the Democrats making a bigger show of something that than it really is.
Yeah, it would be a footnote in in a world which wasn't entirely centered around media sensationalism.
Yeah, and this whole event was co-opted from the moment it started being put together by the grassroots movements to be um, a media uh, slander fest.
Yeah, the mendacity of the Democrat Party and their media toadies is basically the only reason anybody remembers this.
So, as due to all the things and significantly more that we mentioned earlier that happened in November of 2020, on the day the Senate was set to count the votes that would allow Joe Biden to be inaugurated, which was January 6th, a grassroots movement formed throughout conservatives. Started off very grassroots with just individuals saying, "We're going to go to DC and protest," because that's what the left always does. They always protest, and they seem to be getting their way a whole lot lately. Well, there's a whole lot of us, and we're really not happy and think this was sketchy as heck. So we're going to show up in DC and go protest. That part is legitimate. That is about where the legitimacy in the news coverage stops, if they even got that far. So what you wind up with on the day of January 6th is the largest gathering of conservatives I have ever seen unified under a single purpose. And that purpose was explicitly to protest the election and its methodology and procedures at the time. It was not to go overthrow the government. Because most conservatives are still diehard patriots and still love the country. They don't actually want to destroy it, believe it or not. The guy with the
Well,
American flag sticker on his truck is probably not out there to destroy the country.
well, the thing is that because the story that people received was one that was cooked up by the establishment left, they are simply projecting onto the situation what they would have done,
Yeah. So
and they
I
hate the country.
yeah, and they do. But the people that were gathered in DC, almost all of them would happily wave American flags and sing the national anthem. I was en route on the night before, but traffic was so bad going towards Virginia and towards DC that there was no way I was going to make it in time. So I turned. I had another guy in the car with me who was going with me, and we were even going to go. Like this was it. It was put up or shut up time, and I would have been there had I not got stuck. There were so many people going. There were wrecks all over the place, and the interstate was completely jammed up. So as soon as we could, after we realized we were stalled all night long and we're not even going to make like another 50 miles, we slowly inched our way to the next exit and turned around. So yeah, that was that day. In the morning, you see all these people gathered in Washington D.C. and planted feds. I have in parentheses in my notes. This will be important later. And these are conservatives of all stripes. Just anybody to the right of Chairman Mao was there because everybody thought that election had it smelled and stunk, and we needed answers at the very least. And so while they're there, before the election votes are cast, Trump comes out and to address the crowd because somebody's got to say something to this massive gathering of people. This is a lot of people. They literally there was nowhere to stand within a several mile radius of the Capitol. The people had taken up so much ground room, and so he goes to the largest portion of the crowd and begins talking to them, and gives what has been amongst conservative circles known as his peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard speech. And he intended to go walk with them to the Capitol building. What he didn't know was at the time, uh, near the end of his speech, a provocateur in the crowd, planted by the FBI, who they have admitted was an FBI agent via denial. They haven't explicitly said he was, but they're very explicit denials that they don't know who they can't, not that they don't know, but that they can't answer whether he is repeatedly. When if he wasn't, they would just deny it like they have so many other things. Is, as far as I'm concerned, a tacit admission of guilt. and this guy was associated with the FBI or the CIA. Pick your three-letter agency. They're all just as evil. And you can see him touch his hand to his ear to hear his earpiece, take his hand away, whisper to another guy, and that other guy starts rallying people to go tear down the paper thin barricades that were around the Capitol building. And it was just some grates they had put up, like little waist high grates at first. There wasn't exactly strong security here. So when I say tear down the barricade, I mean gently rip out some lightly screwed in bolts and pull the thing back. You could do it with two people. And mob mentality took over, and they got their way to the building. At the building, uh, they did push up against the door, but they were kind of stuck because that door to the Capitol building has ginormously thick iron rods that go through it. Maybe steel rods, I don't know. Some kind of very, very tough security doors they got on the front door of that thing. You're not busting in. And then somebody let them in from the inside. You don't hear anybody talk about this part on the mainstream media, except for maybe Tucker. And then,
Yeah,
while the
but the thing is that this is all it's all on video.
yeah,
Everything is on video these days.
I
There's nothing is secret anymore.
yeah, I am just telling you exactly what I remember from memory of watching the video live at the time because I was watching this at work. I had it on my other monitor at work and was just watching it happen in real time. And there were some people that did break windows, but conspicuously, the individuals that broke the windows were the only members of the crowd that had full masks on and were wearing all black. So, if you're trying to look sketch, like you're there to make a particular group look bad, you're doing a good job at making yourself stand out like a sore thumb. I'm not sure you're making that group look bad though, because it's blatantly obvious who you are. You're a plant. And nobody used the windows to get in. Maybe a few people did. The cameras didn't linger there for very long. So, so yeah, the senators, while this is going on, are stop their little vote counting, and they start doing dramatic distress poses for the cameras, where they lay down on the ground with their gas masks on and run down with people filming them and making exaggerated screeching noises to make it seem like their lives are in actual jeopardy.
And tragically, not just the politicians in the Capitol building were behaving this way.
Yeah, including even the ones that weren't there to be filmed for this mess will continue to tell you to this day their life was put in danger, despite being in, the building 3 buildings down. Hi, AOC. So, yeah. So, they put on a bunch of theater inside of it. Some of the rhinos, almost every single Democrat did. And most of the other Republicans just kind of quietly filed their way down the secret exit and left the House chamber. And now the doors are open, and you have people inside. And the people that got inside just kind of didn't know where to go from here. They didn't actually expect to get into the Capitol building, and they are not here to insurrect the government. So what are they going to do? Well, you got Baked Alaska putting his feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk. You got a guy that stole a lectern. That was a pretty cool picture. And
He turned out to be a lefty.
You got a horn hat guy who took some poses in the Senate chamber, and then
He turned out to just be some wacko, basically.
yeah, and then you got a little old grandma shuffling around with her walker. Uh-huh. That's our best. That's what we sent to go insurrect the government. Well, some people did make it to the Senate chamber doors on the upper level. I think it was the upper level. I might be wrong. I don't remember the exact location in the building. But there were a large number of people in this hallway that were just kind of in there that were asking to be let into the chamber area. And I don't really know what for. It could have just been because the hall was now so congested they needed to decompress. Because it looked like there were quite a few people in there.
I
And
think that they were just sort of like curious at this point, like because this was basically an unsupervised tour. It wasn't really a protest.
yeah, nothing was being destroyed. Like,
Somebody threw some papers on the ground in Pelosi's office or something like that. It was about it.
yeah, probably baked Alaska. And then some trigger happy cop shoots a girl named Ashley Babbitt in the face. She's a Air Force pilot, and I think she was a pilot. Was she a pilot? I don't remember her exact
I know
position.
she was ex-military of some kind,
Yeah,
but I don't know.
she was a member of the Air Force, and kills her. This is the only confirmed death for the entire day as a result of this event itself.
She, as far as I'm aware, she was already escorted by security and was shot through a door that she was on the other side of, unprovoked, as far as I can tell, by one of the security staff in the
Yep,
Capitol building,
yep, and
who
this,
is now being lauded as a hero for killing an unarmed woman who wasn't a threat to him.
yep. So this stumpy little cop is now the media darling, and as far as I'm concerned, he is the scum of the earth and deserves the death penalty. Hanging will concentrate his mind a little bit, but there you go. That's what happened there, and that's kind of where it ended because these people didn't. They just wanted to make their voices heard. They didn't have an objective here. This was mostly an emotional vent. People showing up into DC because November 2020 really was a wake up call to a lot of us. Like, we still had hope before then. If you listen to our earlier podcasts, you will still hear some hope in my voice. You won't hear me trying to find ways to spin it into how we can turn something positive out of it, or how we can delay the inevitable, or how we can maybe make progress for the far future. I was fairly hopeful back then. Like, maybe we can do something and make use of our system. No. We learned on November 2020 that because the judiciary is as broken as it was, we don't have that option. And this was a big emotional outlet for people to go show up and protest in DC with the hope that, maybe the humanity in these people would awaken and they'd realize they done goofed. No, these people are soulless. They live in this corrupt, hellish, just demonic infested area. I truly believe DC just because it's been around power so much and power has been centralized there so much, it could use with a good cleansing. Like, get some priests and exorcists out there because it's probably actually evil because it seems to turn people evil the longer they stay there, even if they had good intentions.
And then they start doing things like talking to empty seats.
Yeah, like good old Chucky talking to his demons in the chair that has nobody sitting in it. Ugh. So yeah, and that's where the day acts itself ended. Everybody filed out, went home, and the people in the cap and the senators immediately began milking it for all it was worth and using it to shame people that would want to object to the votes. So
The sheer degree of complete non-event that this makes it all incredibly cringy.
yeah, and when they left, pretty much everything was still intact. I mean, I guess Nancy Pelosi really doesn't like her shoe marks on her desk, but
I think somebody pooped on it or something.
I could believe that.
That's what I heard.
But I could
A
believe
baked
it. But
Alaska's not exactly civilized.
yeah, he's may not exactly be sane either. Um. So yeah, and afterwards, the the media had their Reichstag fire to demonize the right with. Look at look at these evil right wingers and their very aggressive tour of the Capitol, and they made up so many lies about this whole event.
Never
So
mind all the stuff that had been happening for the previous 12 months.
yeah, never mind all the stuff they did. They're fiery and peace. We get our podcast name from the summer that happened that year because we couldn't think of one, and mostly peaceful was what they used to describe the riots. Mostly peaceful but fiery protest were the words CNN used as a building is burning behind the guy. So yeah, it's a total non-event. The media begins telling people that the conservatives killed all these people. Comes out, no, this person died of a stroke. He didn't actually die of anything that happened at the event. No, this was just an outright fabrication. This one never happened. The only person that died was Ashley Babbitt, and it was your fault, Democrats. Your trigger happy gunman that you're lauding as a hero is the one that killed her. So, congratulations. So, The only reason this is relevant is because the media won't shut up about it, and it is if they could get away with it, it would be the top story everywhere. And you do not ever get to hear a conservative perspective on what happened. So I wanted to include one here at the top end of the show, just so you had an idea of how we remember the event. Because I was watching this live. I intended to go to this thing. Like I was paying very close attention, and this is how my memory tells it to me. I don't know how invested you were on the day it was happening. Probably not anywhere close to as much as I was. But do you remember anything I forgot?
I don't. I don't really think that there was anything like because to me it was just a non-event, right? I wasn't looking at it through the lens of what it was going to become once the media got its hands on it. Just that, it seemed obvious and heartening, in fact, that so many of the people on the ground were calling out anybody who was trying to do anything going too far off reservation as feds and as Antifa and that sort of thing.
Oh
Like,
yeah, that individual Ray Epps, who I was talking about earlier, who spoke into his little earpiece and told the guy to go start tearing down the barricades. Earlier in the day, the crowd had gathered around him and started chanting "Fed" because he was trying to rile them up and instigate violence.
yeah, it was the whole thing was very very obviously arranged by the federal various federal departments who I guess they're willing to go loud with their treason now. They know who they serve and it is not the American people.
Yep.
So yeah, it's sad that that's how far they've fallen because I mean people seem to used to really respect like the FBI.
The F
It seems to be normal that people respected them. That was everybody's opinion was that they were basically incorruptible.
Well, the idea was the FBI was there to catch things like child traffickers and, you know, stuff with the cartels at the border and massive drug seizures and that kind of thing. Stuff that is generally good for the country. And
Look,
we thought that
it's not hard to respect somebody who gets pedophiles off the street, but
yeah,
I mean nowadays
they
they
are the
seem more interested in
pedophiles.
keeping them safe.
Yeah, I would go a step further. I'd say they are the pedophiles. You don't protect something
I don't
that
know what parties
vigorously.
they attend.
That you don't protect something that vigorously unless you are a fan of it. Show me that Epstein client list, FBI. I know you have it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all faith in the three-letter institutions was smashed as well as a result of this incident, which is the only good thing that came out of it. The FBI being so blatant about their insertions and their "we can't answer that" response to all questioning. Ted Cruz had a very good grilling session with uh, one of the directors of the FBI and grilled her over January 6th and Ray Epps especially, and her answer to everything was just, "Sir, we can't answer that." But any question she could deny, she did, which means the answer to everything she said she can't answer is yes.
Yeah, I mean that may not hold up legally, but it was very obvious to anybody watching what was actually taking place there.
Yeah, well, I don't care. My legal system's broken. I don't care about that. That does not matter to me in the slightest if it'll hold up in an American court of law anymore. What matters is what is very easily smellable and what can be deduced as the truth in an era where evidence is not acceptable. I just have to go with what I see, and the raw thing I see, and the way people act, and make inferences from that. And she looks like a liar. So yeah.
So
Next,
sadly, this is the backdrop. This is the backdrop against which everything is now taking place because the media won't let it go. They need this to be the right in the public imagination.
and
Baked
like,
Alaska is now the symbol of the right.
and so hearteningly enough, kind of flopped. They tried. Oh man, did they try? And they're still trying. They still got a special committee that's quote unquote bipartisan, but Adam Kinzinger is a Democrat wearing a rhino suit. He's so left wing, and Liz Cheney is Liz Cheney, and they're the only reasons their little January 6th committee is called bipartisan. Now, one thing I do want to draw attention to because I don't want to accidentally forget. It is easy to forget about this. The legislature and the deep state agencies that when I say deep state, I usually am talking about FBI, CIA, etc. Three-letter agencies that have this substantial amount of power in terms of coming after you and throwing you in the can somewhere.
And that's not just like those two that are like
Yeah, it's
the
not.
the ones which are intelligence community related. There's lots of those three little letter institutions have accreted over the years in the United States that have far more power than they have any right to.
NIS, HSA, it goes on and on and on. It could be any of these. That's why I say whoever's in charge of Joe Biden is just whichever of these has an agenda that day, because they all have an agenda to push and all need the executive to do it, and they just use him to do it and just get the auto okay, making themselves effectively independent entities. So, uh, because of this, last I heard, it was between 40 and 120 people had been arrested by using cell phone geo tracking data, which, by the way, we're told is not sufficient for to prove mules happened in the election. But okay, it's good enough to go throw people in jail and treat them worse than Guantanamo, according to Marjorie Taylor Greene, uh, for an indefinite amount of time as you delay their trials and hearings just so they break and will eventually admit to a plea deal, even though what they are guilty of no crime, just to get them out of there.
Real China hours, bro.
Yeah, this is they are literally torturing people to try and break them before their court date and delaying that court date as long as possible through very illegal means as far as the letter of the law is concerned. But like I said before, the law doesn't matter anymore, and to get them to admit to something they didn't do, and it's in front of everybody if you just do a quick Google search on it. They aren't hiding this. They aren't trying to defend it, but they aren't hiding it. And anytime anybody tries to investigate it and comes out to say anything, the media just plays ball for the Democrats and will not talk about it. And I truly feel bad for these people. These people are the first real victims of a possible coming totalitarian government that will usher in a level of oppression that we have never seen before.
Honestly, my opinion on the matter is that they aren't being kept to break them, though that may be one of the effects. I think that most of them they probably feel validated at this point, and from what it sounds like, they're mostly being kept in the same place so they can at least support each other to some extent. But I think that what the reason they're just being kept and no trial is taking place is because the government wants everyone to forget that they exist. Because if people don't forget, then they will become martyrs. It'll just be a matter of time.
Yeah, and yeah, at least 40 of them are still rotting. I think in that cell. And in a fair and sane world, this wouldn't have happened. And if it was at least a little bit fairer and saner than we got right now, they'd be able to sue the pants off the federal government for taking away 2 years of their life and putting them in those conditions with no cause.
I expect they'll probably also being denied representation, though.
Yeah, I don't doubt they are. It's not a traditional arrest when the FBI or the CIA gets you, unless they take you to a state holding facility. You are not entitled to the same protections that the Constitution grants you. You're detained as an enemy of the state, effectively, and are not allowed anything if they don't want to give it to you. I don't know if that's the actual legal law, but that's the functional law and how it's worked forever. So that's the way it goes.
Yeah, that's what happens when you give a three-letter department extrajudicial power.
This is why you never ever delegate unless you absolutely have to, and just if you're the president, don't make another three-letter agency, please. Kill the ones we do have.
Yeah, I don't. I see most of them as being largely redundant anyway.
Yeah, the FBI clearly doesn't do what it was intended to. It can go. I don't even think we need to try again. Let the states handle it. There's no reason the
Well, I
states
mean,
can't have their own version of the FBI that handles international and big time crimes.
my understanding of it is that they've more or less been redundant since Al Capone was arrested.
Yeah. Uh, They were set up effectively to deal with prohibition mobsters. I think the FBI was. The Central Intelligence Agency is our espionage agency. Every government is going to have an espionage agency, but you can flush this one and start again.
Yeah, there's not any reason why you need to retain the same mob of people who have interests other than their job.
Yeah,
Like they're supposed to serve the country. You should not need to retain particular people for that. You
and
can just find the best people for the job.
and
It's not a hereditary role or anything.
yeah, and especially when it comes to things to the espionage branch of the government, which all governments have and won't admit to. You need the most patriotic patriots possible for that job if you want your country to be successful. Otherwise, they're just going to flake on you. They'll take the deals that are offered to them to spill information on you instead and turn double agent. The IRS can go. You can have the states take care of that.
Realistically, who's going to argue against the abolition of the IRS?
Not a single American of any blood stripe.
And not a single American who has to get their day's pay from a day's work.
If you have listened to our other podcasts, No Excuses, you have heard me for the last 2 months go on and off at length about how much I hate the federal government because of taxes and how they work for small governments. If the IRS disappeared tomorrow, I would be naked in the streets dancing in
I mean,
uncontrolled. It would
I'm not
just
an
be so
ANCAP.
happy.
I'm not an ANCAP or anything. Like I understand the necessity of taxation so that the state can function, but I'm pretty sure that that's not what the IRS's job is.
No, the IRS's job is to target specific individual companies that lean a specific way and fill a specific niche that might be getting a little too uh, against the establishment and crack down with audits because the tax code is so ridiculous you can stick anybody with a tax violation if you try hard enough and you twist the words enough. It doesn't matter how
Like
squeaky clean they are.
it really does seem deliberate. And the reason I say that is because I know it's deliberate in China, because that's what they use taxation for in China.
Yeah.
The government cronyism and corruption is rife through every level of society in China, and basically the way the economy operates is sort of like an adjunct to the government planned economy rather than the actual economy. Um, but the tax code in China is specifically used for the purpose of generating violations to punish enemies of the party. Like that's what it's for, and everybody knows it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems to be the way the IRS has developed as well.
Yeah. The IRS is an agency that does not do the job of tax collection so much as everybody is going to pay their taxes because the IRS is a threat, but the IRS is only going to go after people if they really violate their taxes. You're given a lot of leeway when filing your taxes casually and normally. You can extend forever. You got like a whole year's worth of extensions you can apply to any given fiscal year. You can call them up with any number of excuses. And as long as you're on the right side of the establishment, they're probably not going to come after you. You have to just not pay your taxes for them to take notice if you're a normal person. And that's how it should be. That should be where it stops, but that isn't where it stops. Because they're used as a sword by the executive branch to go after whoever they don't like. See Obama going after the Tea Party is the most blatant example in recent history. He just had all the Tea Party's affiliated accounts and businesses audited. And because of the way the tax code works, of course they found something. It's impossible not to find something. Everybody violates the tax code when they file their taxes. I would hate to see how many times I've violated it. And I have a CPA looking over it and checking my work. So yeah, it's a mess, that. And yeah, they can all go die in a fire or get thrown in the dumpster. I don't care. Maybe the wood chipper. So that's the background dressing for everything that follows. So immediately after, we have 2021, and I only have two notable events. One notable event from 2021 worth talking about because we mostly want to focus on the midterms. We're skipping a lot of what happened in Biden's first 2 years.
It's been a busy couple years. most of that concern mendacity relating to the, what is it they say, unknown virus of unknown origin or whatever it is,
The Wu Ping Koof.
the
Yeah,
kung flu.
yeah. So so yeah, who knows what what the what Susan has figured out how to flag. So we have to use euphemisms. So yeah, we are now in a mostly proof-free United States, where most of the mandates have been lifted, and they're starting to really peel back on it because well, the election's over. They don't need it
Yeah,
anymore.
it's not really a winning issue anymore.
Yeah,
That was the only motivation that was ever there, was what political advantages can we gain, and now they think that they've basically hit the limit on what is advantageous politically.
they still want to keep it in their pocket in case they think they can pull it out again.
Oh yeah, no government has ever given up powers.
But for now, they've let up on the enforcement of their ridiculous policies and stop people having to wear masks everywhere, and even needing to get the vaccine is starting to be lifted in most of the U.S. So, but that's ongoing and will be ongoing throughout it. Uh, Notably, he had a few executive policies that I want to highlight. One in particular, because it will highlight every one of Biden's executive orders from this point forward. His very first one, his first day in office, he cancels the Keystone Pipeline. Now, people don't really know what this pipeline is. If I talk to them, conservatives will just tell you canceling it was bad, but they don't know why. And as far as I can tell, liberals think it was a literal demon from hell that was going to eat people. Because I don't think
Well,
they have a clue.
it's probably one of the demonic allies of the Sun Monster.
Yeah. So, notably, the Keystone Pipeline getting cut uh, makes it so the U.S. and Lower Canada cannot move oil to almost fairly close to the Gulf of Mexico. It doesn't quite make it all the way down there, I don't think, but it runs most of the way vertically down the country and would be a way to get oil through and distributed through various points in the Midwest at stations where people could fill up their oil trucks and move it out. And it would make transporting of oil way cheaper, way more energy efficient, you greenies, and would have been a very good source of jobs and, in general, just a good idea. Keystone Pipeline all around just seems to have been a great idea because it just moved the oil. It didn't dig it. It didn't do anything that the lefties would hate. Normally, it just moved it and made it easier to transport, which means less driving, so your car's got less emissions. It means you don't got to run the pumping lines nearly as long. You can just pump it to you can just pump it onto a truck from your collection thing near wherever you're pumping, and go drive it to the pipeline and dump it in, and it's going to go wherever it's going to go. This was apparently evil enough to cancel on day one, though. And alongside this, he then proceeded to cancel practically every single upcoming oil, gas, and natural resource mining rights and collection deals that people had made with the federal government, because most of these deals need to be approved by the federal government because they're on federal land. Or in the cases where they're not, the state land is a lot harder to dig on. so, so yeah, our ability to produce and transport oil was kneecapped, and other resources as well, natural gas, etc. And this was how Biden opened his presidency. His very first thing he did. We are now reliant on the Hawaiian snack bar loving towel heads for oil again.
Now, I'm not really clear personally on whether it was done in order to directly impede energy independence or whether it was done simply because it was too Trumpy and they wanted to just aggressively un-Trump everything they felt was too Trump.
Well, energy independence and the Keystone Pipeline were both Trump things. Trump made that
Yeah,
pipeline
but
a reality while
the
it was stuck.
the question I have is whether they were actually acting in service of an agenda at that point, or whether at that point they were just reflexively trying to un-Trumpify everything.
I think it could be both, honestly. Uh, if it happens to be the other, it probably is why it got. If it happens to be both, then it's probably why it got moved up the priority list to day one.
Because I mean, honestly, those first few days of Biden's administration seemed like there was just an exercise in unga bunga cancelling all the previous executive actions.
Yep. This included stopping the border wall construction, uh, attempting to ban states from privately funding the border wall. He didn't succeed in that. It got overturned in Arizona if Carrie Lake wins. Said she will continue building that stupid wall, and Texas has been continuing to build it. Biden has actually gotten so mad at Arizona counties that are on the border who have just put shipping containers up at holes in the wall that weren't finished yet that he
It
ordered
was
them to
shipping
take.
containers, bro.
Yeah, he ordered them to take them down. It's like they're just like, lol, no.
We need to store the shipping containers somewhere, bro.
Yeah,
What's
that
your problem, bro?
the city officials are just like, nah, ain't gonna do that. So props to them for doing that. I like that. I the people in that city should feel proud of their administration.
Yeah, I feel
Uh,
like it's a very tasteful form of quietly rebelling.
just just saying, yeah, no. I think a whole lot of the U.S. could learn from that example. Just anytime this resident of the White House says something and says you need to do X, oh, the FBI wants me to do what now? Yeah, no. That should be your response. That would win so much respect from me from so many of what we call our leaders in in throughout America. So yeah, return to federalism. It was a good idea. I wish we got to see it through. Okay. So his only other big thing in 2021 I have noted is the Afghanistan withdrawal, and this one's worth bringing up because of how big of a disaster it was.
This is another one of those things that I have no idea what portion of this was deliberate and what portion of this was just clownery.
So I have framed it in my notes here as though it was just to do something that wasn't Trump because Trump obviously had a good plan. He had good advice from somebody and he had managed to concoct with them some kind of approach that at least makes sense. So Trump had agreed to withdraw his forces by June of 2021. This is earlier than when Biden took him out, and he was still going to leave a small dispatch force of 10,000 there to dissuade the Taliban from reneging on their deal and to let the Afghani government continue to establish itself and get to work on its own feet. And it was going to keep them there as a police force while everybody else got to come home, and the war would be declared over. Uh, Joe Biden decided not to do this. Joe Biden decided that number one, he wasn't going to pull out by the time Trump said he was. So by June 2021, we still weren't out, and we're just now starting to move things like we might be thinking about moving out, and didn't actually start to get the last troops out of there till the end of August. And on August 30th, the last few remaining U.S. forces, while they were preparing to leave, saw the Taliban, as Trump was afraid of, broke their original agreement and attacked the American established Afghani government and the remaining American soldiers in Kabul. They overthrew the American government, the established government, and reinserted themselves as the new ruling class in Afghanistan. During the withdrawal itself on that day, at least 11 Marines were killed and 2 members of the Navy as they attempted to defend the airport or run away from it. The story's not really clear. Doesn't matter. They're members of the military that got killed due to Biden's incompetence. Uh, and that stories that happened on the ground that day, what happened in Kabul, are actually very contradictory, and I could not find a consistent telling of them. But it's much of a muchness. The important thing is Biden had a terrible plan to pull literally everybody out because the the government that America had established over there was not ready to defend itself yet.
I think calling it a plan is ennobling it.
Yeah, this was beyond stupid, and it,
I think it's probably just the sort of the casual racism that is endemic to the Democrat Party, where they just think everybody who is not them is retarded. That's at play here. Like they probably didn't take the Taliban as seriously as a threat. They
yeah,
probably thought that it didn't matter what they did because they're just a bunch of sand dwelling goat herders. Nobody cares. We'll leave. Nothing will happen because they're incompetent. They can't organize themselves and they can't fight.
Yeah,
Because it's not like the Democrats have ever had much sympathy for American troops in the field or anything like that.
yeah. And the big extra sting at the end of this is all the military equipment that America had supplied for the established government over there is now in the hands of the Taliban. The remaining equipment they hadn't yet evacuated is now in the hands of the Taliban.
They have
And
like the like third biggest air force in the world now or something.
yep, something like that. I don't know if they got enough people that know how to run those jets, but they've got them.
Well, the reality is it's going to end up on the black market, and instead they will have equipment they do know how to use that they're going to buy with the money from it.
Yeah. Callum of Lotus Eaters had a walkthrough of Afghanistan post Taliban takeover. The Mad Lad went over there and did some exploring and did a little hour long, not documentary, but just kind of exploratory video of him walking around and seeing the
He was
sights.
invited by Lord Miles, who later said that his invite was actually a joke. He didn't expect him to take it up.
Yeah, and that'll give you a good state of what has happened in Afghanistan afterwards. It's a good watch. I think it's free on Callum's personal channel. I don't think it's on the Lotus Eaters channel, so you can go look it up. And yeah, it's worth looking into. It's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I haven't had time to watch it myself, but props to him for actually doing the journalism.
Yeah,
He did a journalism.
yeah, that boy has grown on me as Lotus Eaters has gone on. At first, I was only watching it because I used to follow Sargon a little bit, and I don't agree with Sargon on most things, but I'll check it out.
Well,
And
Sargon has drifted politically
oh
by a
yeah,
fairly significant amount.
he's getting there. He's getting there. If he becomes a Christian, I'll jump out of my chair and be like, he made it. We got him all the way there. Well, we didn't.
At
He
this point,
didn't.
he's just in denial. That's all.
Oh, he's. I think he'll get there in the end. But yeah, they're a mixed outlet, that one that we're talking about, but they have a couple good people. I think Callum and Carl Bean Sargon are worth listening to these days. Callum's really
Well,
grown on me.
the thing is they're now not now so far in what shall I say enlightened centrist territory that you can't understand where they're coming from, because usually I don't know about you, but I find enlightened centrism just too hard to understand. Like
Yeah,
the logic at play there, I don't grasp.
I
It
see it as
doesn't make
unprincipled.
sense to me.
I've always said I see it as unprincipled, and trying to understand it just can be broken down like that.
I mean,
These people just don't have principles.
I default to treating it as unprincipled because that's about the only part of it that I can understand. Like, I don't actually see the logic fundamentally behind the idea that the middle position is somehow more moral.
Yeah, I don't either. It's entirely possible that one side is just so wrong that the other side is just right. Or that one side just happens to get things right, and sometimes they're just right, and the other side trying to say boo to them and say no, yeah, they can't be right because the other side was right. So, yeah, I don't see any value in it either. There are almost no situations, and I want to say there are no situations, but I'll put in almost just in case because my brain's not able to see my whole thought history of an enlightened centrist argument being presented to me where I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Well, it seems to me to be predicated on the idea that no side can actually be correct, and there's always going to be some synthesis of the two points of view that will be better. I don't necessarily believe that that's strictly true. There's a lot of people who do ascribe to that sort of vaguely Hegelian idea that, oh
But
well,
we're
you have to generate a synthesis between the thesis and antithesis, and the synthesis will always be superior. But I don't see any reason to believe that that's metaphysically always the case.
yeah, well, we're both Christians. We believe in a divine truth of some kind. So there is a right answer in our way of looking at the world. So so that's another thing, folks. You're getting a podcast from two Christians who are very not quiet about it. We don't hide it. We don't always advertise it, but we're certainly not quiet about it. So know what you're getting into, I guess. All right, that should help you frame our perspectives a bit better. Would be a better way of saying what I'm trying to say. So yeah, that's all I got before the midterms of significant events I really wanted to hit on from Biden's presidency because it's just been a legislative nightmare of just more authoritarian controls and attempts at control that either are so brazen they fail, like the Ministry of Truth or whatever its real name was, or him repealing the individual mandate. That one stuck and has ticked me off because it makes paying for insurance with the company mandatory again, or having all your employees be insured, which is the option we took, and having to force me onto junk Obamacare that I pay next to nothing for. It doesn't cover anything. Just so I don't get dinged on my taxes for 3 times what I'm paying in insurance. Thanks, Biden. Well, thanks, CIA and FBI. So we could go on with these minor legislative breakdowns, but overall, none of them really are going to hold up as being in public memory for very long. I don't think they're either going to
Um,
stick around or come to an end eventually.
I suppose the only other thing with any kind of lasting impact is Supreme Court appointment.
All right, the diversity hire,
Yeah, like I don't know her name. I don't see
Anji.
why anybody would want to know her name because it's not like she was appointed because of who she is as a person or anything like that.
Yeah, she wasn't appointed by her merits. She wasn't appointed.
Like
Uh,
somebody held the color swatch up to her and decided she was dark enough.
like that Family Guy meme, but in reverse with the colors reversed on the color swatch.
Yeah.
And yeah, she was dark enough and had the right shape of genital, and therefore was allowed onto the Supreme Court.
And that's not innuendo either. Joe said as much.
Yeah, Joe explicitly stated he wanted a black woman.
Yeah, so that concern then now supersedes everything else.
Yeah,
All other concerns about whether or not they're suitable for the job and whether or not they have the expertise to be good at it or whether or not they have the character required to serve in that capacity, all of those things are now subordinated to whether it is a black woman.
yep, and yeah, now we have diversity hire. Now she's replacing who was already a consistent left wing voter, so it doesn't swing the court in any way. That's a small solace to take. She's going to be there for a while. Uh, but
The guy that she replaced looked like such a soy boy for an ancient person.
yeah, it's like
Like I don't think I've ever seen an old man who was so effeminate before.
the proto soy boy. Yeah, I forget his name because he doesn't matter when discussing votes because he's not one of the hard. He wasn't one of the
Like,
hard opinion writers, and he wasn't a swing vote.
yeah, it doesn't seem like he'd written any opinions that anybody really remembers as
Yeah,
being particularly influential or anything. It was just a Democrat vote. He was a political operative.
yeah, he was just there to work for the party. Um, and he's not but he wasn't as stupid as like Sotomayor.
Well, Sotomayor is another diversity hire. They just didn't come right out and admit it.
Yeah, she's a diversity hire that's a special kind of stupid.
Yeah, she's just legendarily stupid. Didn't she recently? Wasn't she the one recently who mixed up de facto and de jure
Yes,
and was unable to take the hint when I can't remember which one. One of the other justices tried to gently correct her so that she wouldn't embarrass herself. Oh, a justice from across the aisle, no less.
oh,
But she didn't understand. She didn't get it.
yeah, probably was Alito. I could see Alito doing that.
I think it might be more than one of them gave her a chance. Actually, I think even Clarence Thomas tried to give her an opportunity to realize that she'd made a mistake and correct herself. But no, she didn't. She just stuck to her guns.
Yeah, if it wasn't Sotomayor, it was the new diversity hire. So yeah, just another seat that will be filled for a while, quite a while, by a party operative.
Yeah. Well, also there was that. It became sort of a popular meme that went around about the number of words used in dissents and things.
Yeah,
And
hers is
the new one is like several orders of magnitude higher than any of the conservative ones, and significantly higher than all of her fellow justices.
yeah. Oh, you know,
They really did get a special crop, didn't they?
yeah. I think Clarence Thomas will be the last great Supreme Court justice in my lifetime. That boy's one of a kind. I will give
Yeah,
special shout outs to
I
that
think
boy.
I think he should go down in history as one of the greatest that you ever had.
Yeah,
But there are others who are okay. Like I think Alito's all right.
yeah,
I'm not that fond of um, Kavanaugh or Comey Barrett. Like they can be okay, but
they have
they're
blind
kind of a bit
spots.
they're sort of normie, basically, is the way that I think of it. They're just kind of normie.
Yeah,
They operate within a paradigm that doesn't exist anymore.
yeah. This is a thing on that's worth mentioning before we get into the midterms themselves. Is the world the boomercons want to live in and think they still live in is gone. The internet happened. Communications technology happened. We can see everything. Trump happened. The curtain has been pulled back, and the the rhetoric has escalated. The actions have escalated. Like we don't live in the live and let live America anymore. But yeah, Comey Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh are definitely normies, and Amy Coney Barrett especially has disappointed me on several rulings that she's made. She clearly has a blind spot when it comes to what's a good way to describe it without getting banned. Uh,
She has woman issues.
yeah, anything that comes to social matters, she has a big blind spot for.
Yeah, well, she's sort of part of a sect is the wrong word, but she's sort of a part of a movement within Catholicism that is extremely obsessed with what they think of as social justice, which is when used in a Catholic context has a different precise meaning. Although the gist is sort of roughly the same. It's a it's actually a term that was essentially stolen from Catholicism originally, social justice. When it was brought into the modern era by Catholicism as being a sort of a catch-all term for um, the the action of the faithful to ensure that matters which are not that which exist primarily within the political sphere rather than the theological sphere are still dealt with in a moral manner. It was a very loose term originally, but now it's got a very specific meaning since it was taken on board by our not co-religionists, our actual enemies, as far as being ultimately being part of a foreign religion. But because the word has been suborned effectively, those groups of Catholics who are we're very interested in those secular affairs and trying to make them conform to Catholic ethics. A lot of them sort of got dragged into basically left wing social policy because of their involvement in a thing which the word for it has now been subverted.
Yeah,
So Comey Barrett is very, very vulnerable to that sort of thing. It's something you see a lot with particularly American Catholics that have rubbed shoulders with a lot of evangelicals who have drifted to the left.
yeah. You'll. I am very reluctant to talk about American Protestantism because that's most of it,
Well,
aside
when you
from
say that, it doesn't really mean anything. Like
e-
American Protestantism is in no way a monolith, which
yeah,
is the major Catholic criticism of them. Is that there's not even a suggestion of unity. Like there's no way of even classifying them as the same thing.
like yeah, the only institution I I I am biased towards is the Southern Baptist Convention because I am a Southern Baptist, and
Well, it's not so much being biased towards it as it being a patch of ground that you need to protect from being subverted.
yeah, it's so far as held, and goodness knows they've tried to infiltrate it. They're doing their best. I pray it stays exactly as rock solid as it has been because they're usually pretty reluctant to change. The only major changes they made were around the time of the Civil War or
As
around the
soon as
time
it
of the early
stops being
1900s.
run by old people and starts being run by the next generation of evangelicals, it's going to have a tough battle to fight to maintain its identity.
Yeah, but I I have always found a lot of success grounding myself in the Southern Baptist Church, and Hope I can continue to do so. I hope it doesn't.
My gut feeling on the matter is that the Southern Baptist Convention has maintained its identity by being functionally run by old school fire and brimstone preachers who are a dying breed.
Yeah. So I know I've talked to you. I am worried about my current church when about 20 years from now, eventually my pastor will be in his 80s and he'll have to retire. And I don't know what kind of process they'll have lined up, but they're gonna have to do be very meticulous and do a real good job in selecting the successor to him because he's a big strong man in the local community, even if he hates Trump, and for some who knows why reason. Though he did almost make a Trump joke in a sermon once. He said he stopped himself, but he mentioned after the fact he almost made a Trump joke. It involved Nehemiah and Trump building the wall. So maybe he doesn't hate him as much as I thought I did. Anyway, tangent aside. Uh, we got off in the weeds on Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh. So yeah, I think that's all the framing for what's gone on and all the major events that are worth touching on before we jump into the midterms themselves because these are going to be pretty meaty. And I'm going to have to explain how midterm elections work to the general public. So, you ready to get started with it?
Yep, yep.
All right. So, Vol, you didn't take a U.S. civics class. I've written down the notes for you. I don't know if you've read them or how thorough.
I have skimmed through them. But the thing is that this is an alien system of government to me. Like we don't have midterm elections because we don't have a Senate and Congress.
Right. So, U.S. Civics 101. The American government, at least in theory, I'm telling you how it's supposed to work, not how it functionally works, is divided on the federal level into three branches: the judiciary, which is not elected but appointed. The president nominates somebody to be appointed when a seat is vacant of the 9 seats, and the House and the Senate have to confirm them. And then, if they're confirmed by a majority vote in both houses, they go on to take the seat, and they become life servers, and they'll be on the court forever until they retire or die. And next, you have the executive. Everybody knows about the president. Happens every 4 years. Every 4 years, we all turn the country into a circus and listen to a bunch of liars tell us a bunch of things that are not true, and then go try to pick the one that lied the least.
That was actually why I got into watching politics, was because it was so entertaining watching the Americans tie themselves in knots every 4 years.
Yeah, it is a total circus every time the presidency is up for grabs. On and that's just the way that's just the way it do. We're not here to discuss the executive election though. We're now in the midterm election. This happens every 2 years after a president has been elected. So it is between presidential elections this will happen. So presidential election was in 2020, midterms are in 2022, the next presidential election will be 2024, and the next midterm will be 2026. So in the midterms, the entire House is up for grabs. The House of Representatives. These are each state is divided into districts based on however they gerrymandered them this year, and the population of the state decides how many districts they can gerrymander with. And each district gets one representative they can send to the House, and the people that physically live in that district vote for that representative, and will send their representative to the House. There is no term limit for people in the House. There is no term limit for people in the Senate either, for that matter. There needs to be, but there ain't. That's only a small part of the problem, anyway. And usually the incumbent will just run again and win, but since every single House seat is always up for grabs in the midterms, there's always a chance to throw somebody out, or somebody to get districted out by the party itself with gerrymandering, which happens all the time. And this is one of the few both sides do it issues that happen a lot, but only because rhinos exist. And the people that are part of the corrupt uni party that call themselves Republicans will also engage in it. But it is only a both sides issue so far in that technically the person doing it has an R next to their name in some states.
Well, generally speaking, gerrymandering is something that exists for the establishment to protect its current position. It's not really designed for people with actual political views. It's designed for seat warmers.
Yeah. So the 435 House seats are all technically up for grabs, and on big shakeup years, like possibly this one, if we can avoid a 2020, which is what I'm just going to call the incident now, to avoid being banned. If we can avoid a 2020 or as much of a 2020, this is a potentially very big radical shakeup here where a lot of entrenched people could lose their seats because seats that you would normally assume to be safe, I just don't believe they're safe. People are just not happy. So, uh, currently, the House has 220 Democrats and 112 Republicans. A simple majority is needed in order to have your party's member be Speaker of the House. So, and for reference, it was 233 Democrats to 195, but due to retirements, deaths, and various special elections being held, the number shifted red quite a bit in the interim, more than I've seen it shift before, at least in my memory. I don't keep a track of this very closely, so I may just be forgetting. But I don't think I've seen it shift that much in a 2 year span from retirements, deaths, and special elections. So, um, getting a simple majority of please, can I do this in my head? I cannot because I'm bad at math. Pull the calculator out. I feel ashamed. I'm not Asian. That's fall. Fall, give me some of your Asian powers.
I was a C student in math.
So you need 218. So 218 is a simple majority in the House, and that will get you the ability to have your party's nominee for Speaker be the Speaker of the House and control what comes up for a vote. And it effectively allows you to pass anything as long as you vote along party lines. A super majority
become the president if the president and vice president cark it.
Yeah, they're in line to the presidency immediately after the vice president. So if both president and vice president die in a plane crash, the Speaker of the House becomes president. Right now, if the current members are reelected, the Republican representative will be the super rhino Kevin McCarthy, and if the Democrats win, it'll continue to be leading arch lich, her evilness Nancy Pelosi. We really got to find her phylactery. So
she looks like she's dead, that's for sure.
Yeah. Said that about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she hung on into her 90s just to spite us.
Yeah, but it ended up spiting her political opponents in the end. So
yeah. So that's the House races. House races are not really worth following. It's going to be a very regional thing, and I don't have eyes on the ground in every single district in every single state. So I have my local area, and I have reports from people that I know that live in other areas, but that barely scratches the surface. That's like 10 districts tops. So the rest is just general impressions on the country as a whole and hoping it's enough to shift the votes. So we're not going to be covering the House races. The only one I care about is MTG anyway, and she's not even in my district. And she's in a safe red district. She'll be fine. So, there are a few exceptions to those 435, though, I think. I think a few are reserved for special elections because somebody died very recently, and that's screwed with the rules in their state on how that works. And the Indian reservation adjacent areas and the Indian reservations themselves can technically elect a representative, but the House has to confirm them, and historically they don't. So that's the thing. So just getting into the details there, but it's technically true. And that will happen consistently or semi-consistently every single midterm. Every 2 years, 1/3 of the Senate is up for grabs. The Senate seats, the seats themselves physically, are divided into Group A, Group B, and Group C. And this is Group C's year, I think, because the one that has one more. Because the Senate has 100 people. To control the Senate, like the House, you need a simple majority. So you need 51 people. Currently, it's 50-50. But in the event of a 50-50 split, the vice president is the tiebreaker. The vice president's actual role is president of the Senate. That's how it was set up in the Constitution. So anytime there's a 50-50 Senate, the vice president is the tiebreaker and will almost always, without exception, vote in favor of their party. I can't think of an exception. Maybe during the Andrew Jackson years, things were a little crazy back then in the legislative branches. So maybe you saw some dissent then, but as it stands now, they just vote party line. So if it's a 50-50 split and your party wins the executive, you have the Senate, which is the case now with Camel Hair being the tiebreaker. So the Democrats can vote along party lines in the Senate and pass whatever they want. So this election, 34 Senate seats are up for grabs. Of those seats, 14 of them are currently being seated by Democrats and 20 by Republicans. Most of those Republicans are fairly safe. Not so sure about some of them Democrats, though, as we'll get into. So every senator serves a 6-year term until their cycle in the ABC seats comes up, and then they go up for vote again. Though special elections can screw up how this works a bit and shuffle seats around. I don't know the exact rules for it, but if somebody dies, is usually the reason, and somebody has to be appointed by the governor, and it can screw with the timing of the election, and may delay it by as much as 6 months to sometimes just skipping a whole cycle. There have been senates in the past that have not been fully seated, so this doesn't happen often. So this means we just need to flip one seat from blue to red and hold what we got to roll with the Senate. Now, the Senate is currently led functionally while the vice president is the president of the Senate, and because she's a Democrat, the Democrats would control it that way. Functionally, though, it's run by Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader. So Chucky's Playhouse is the Senate, as long as the Democrats are in control. If the Republicans win, it doesn't get much brighter for you. You get Cocaine Mitch.
Yeah. Not really that thrilling, to be honest.
That said, Cocaine Mitch will cockblock a lot of things the Democrats try to do. So vote like your life depends on it. Because if nothing else, Cocaine Mitch is real good at being the turtle he is. He is a snake in the grass that will stab you in the back, but he'll do it very slowly.
Yeah, he's not really much one for change. He just wants to protect his position and never move anywhere ever again. So
yeah, so he will at least put a doorstop on their bad ideas for a little bit if we manage to get him in there. In both the House and the Senate, there's a characteristic called a supermajority, where if the president vetoes a bill, it goes back to the House. It's less important in the Senate. It just gives you vote security. And if they get 66 votes, and it affords them to be able to pass some bills without having to worry about any overrides by committee if they can get 66 votes, but it's much of a muchness and usually only applies to budgetary things. In the House, though, if you get a supermajority, you can override a presidential veto. So if you don't control the executive, but you control 435 times 0.66, I'm good at math. If you manage to somehow get 288 seats, don't see that happening this election. We could. Anything's possible. I never say never. We'll be able to completely override Joe Biden's vetoes and push through whatever legislation we want, regardless of what he says.
Can a supermajority overturn executive orders?
No. They can pass a law that makes them illegal, but they cannot overturn them directly. So that is how your U.S. civics lesson for how these work. So, questions, class.
I mean, do you reckon it works when it all plays out the way it's supposed to?
I mean, it's a good structure for a system. It's got a few too many easily corruptible parts, like the districts for the houses, or the way the Senate is set up in general. It's functionally a dead body now. It doesn't do what it used to do. It used to be to debate the merits of a bill and really give it the scrutiny that it deserved, and they just don't do that anymore. They just vote along party lines. So it was a good
Well, the thing
idea.
is that the bills all have like 4,000 pages,
Yeah, so you can't do that
but
anymore.
it's not even conceivable for them to debate it.
So with the Senate being functionally just another branch of government that just another half of the legislative body now instead of the proper scrutinizing, because the way the founders envisioned it, right? The Senate would be the people elected state, the whole state would elect them because there's only two senators per state, period end. And they envisioned the Senate, those in the Senate, as the people that were able to reach statewide appeal, that would be well educated and know how to use the printing press and be able to disseminate their ideas and how they would look at things very well. And they would be the ones to go to the Senate, and the House would be just the best guy that that local area had because they weren't very populated back then. And as our population has grown, and the way information spreads has changed, and the bills have become bloatier and bloatier, and the government legislature more and more out of control, the functional purpose of both of those branches has completely changed. Because
So
that,
there's basically we can strike off the functionality of all three branches of government at this point.
from their intentional intended purposes, yes. I mean, technically, the legislature still works. It just works against the American people almost consistently with every decision they make. There is never a law that's passed that I think, oh, that was a good idea these days.
Well, that might be because you probably have enough laws at this point.
Yeah, I am of the opposite nature to Vault. I was not raised in a society that respected authority, and I'm me. I've always had a rebellious streak. So anytime an authority tries to tell me what to do, my initial reaction is, yeah, no.
Well, the thing is that there's a difference between respecting authority and respecting the monarch. The monarch does have supreme authority, but most most people, even of my particular disposition, we respect the monarchy, but we don't respect the parliament. The most respect we give the parliament is that the monarch has authorized the parliament to to operate, but that's about it. Like there is not we just view them as people who have unfortunately managed to collar a certain amount of power. Basically, that they're not they don't have the legitimacy that the monarch does in a monarchy, because a monarch has to have legitimacy. They have to be acknowledged as legitimate monarchs. But a parliament can't really obtain legitimacy in a very concrete sense. The entirety of their legitimacy stems from the monarch giving them permission to operate, which intrinsically doesn't communicate any legitimacy to them as individuals who are fit for the purpose, because it's the institution that receives the sanction of the monarch, not the people involved. The people involved don't have any legitimacy, so there's not really any good reason to respect their authority.
Yeah. So all parts working as they're supposed to. I have really solidified. I thought this before, but hadn't put it into concrete thoughts when we were doing our last shows. I think the U.S. can be used as a blueprint for a bunch of good ideas. We learned a lot, and to throw all those lessons away would be stupid. But we've seen how the weaker parts of our system and what can be corrupted, and we can at least try to shore up the holes next when we try again and do something a little different. I don't exactly know how. I'm not
That-
a
I feel like
statescrafter.
that's sort of like a in the current context though, that's sort of a left wing way of looking at it, because I don't think that you can impose a system of government top down on a people and have it work. Like it's like Niccolo Machiavelli said that a republic is only suitable for a situation where the people are ready to actually be part of a republic.
I guess
And if you don't have that situation, then it's going to default to being ruled by a prince no matter what.
I guess what's a good way to put it? It's just I do not see the current systems being stable, and some form of adjustment or collapse will happen. And what I mostly meant with that was I don't want to throw the whole thing out. I think there are enough good parts.
Well,
And
the thing is that the throwing the whole thing out would not do any good. Like you would not obtain good from doing that because let's say that you did want to transition to a monarchy, just as an example. There is no one who has the legitimacy to rule,
yeah,
so
it's a
it would make everything a lot worse. You have no choice but to try and stay the course at this point in time because
yeah.
there's no monarch who would be endorsed by the people at large.
But we're talking at points of eventual collapse and hypotheticals, not really relevant to the midterms. Uh, so anyway, moving on from that before we get too off in the weeds
Well,
again.
what is relevant as far as the midterms are concerned is that the midterms will allow the American people to have a barometer for how well is this current system we have actually operating. Like, are the gears turning or not?
Yeah, I suppose if a 2020 does happen again, even in a midterm, and is even more obvious somehow, that's still in a way beneficial, and that you could twist that into using that to go look at what happened. Like we already have the normie boomercons make the joke that, oh, it's a shame my grandma voted Republican her whole life until she died, and then she voted straight Democrat.
Well, I mean, this is sort of it plays into the discussion we had the other day about Shays Rebellion and the importance of a federal standing army for the United States. You need to establish a certain level of cooperation of all involved in order to overturn a system of government that has ceased to function. Like everyone needs to be on the same page about it because you need to be prepared to fight the federal army,
Yeah,
as much of the army as the federal government can bring together, and that was the intended purpose, is so that things like Shays Rebellion, which are a rabble of drunken louts who feel like the government had stiffed them on pay, those people aren't able to therefore just overturn the government on their own because they need to have the approval of a significant amount of military force.
yeah. You can take a lot from these midterms in terms of taking the temperature where things can realistically go and where they're at right now. Because while it's fun to think in hypotheticals of what I would do if I was made, God King of the U.S. through magic, that's not going to happen. There is much more realistic paths we can take, but it's it's hard to get a barometer on the people right now, and part of that is because 2020's happened, and I don't know how many people actually lean one way or the other as a general population. And the boomer cons throw a wrench into everything because they just kind of want to be couch potatoes, what I can tell.
Yeah, they think everything will be okay because it was okay in the past, is basically their logic.
So trying to use votes as data for that is spoiled by the fact the boomer cons still vote R, even though they're not going to do anything. So you have to keep all that in mind when you're trying to analyze vote numbers that come out from these elections. But it can you can notice the outliers is a good way that I have always taken these elections and trying to take information from them, because outlier elections where a sudden opposite party candidate destroys the other one in a district that normally is safe, and the surprise winners like that, or ones that were supposed to be a tight race, somebody just took off and ran. Uh, you can usually tell, okay, the media really doesn't have their finger on what's going on here and has been inflating their opinion or the opinions of the people towards a certain direction. But
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 the
yeah,
Democrats seem confident to like run a stroke patient, for instance.
yeah, that really makes you wonder. We'll get to that one last on the Senate races because I I go back and forth on that one a lot. So I guess we can get right into the races that are important.
We
Uh,
take a break. I need to go to the bathroom, to be
Yep.
honest.
So I'm going to split the recording here. There will be part two where we will cover the individual races and wrap up the show and any miscellaneous topics that we have listed, and we'll get out of here. But this is the end of part one. This will be and that will be uploaded as a separate video. So we will be back in a little bit.